All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Online Bible Institute Network podcast. I'm Douglas Laws. With me are my father, Steve Laws, and Pastor Tanko Brain. We are working through our series at Keys Vineyard Church called Kingdom Tension. We're going to be in part 6 this week. And this podcast, we go over our notes and we get ready for the next weekend coming up. And I'm looking through your notes, Dad, and it looks like a really good one. We're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 2, verses 36 through 40, where Jesus goes over the greatest commandments. And, the points that we make in this message are on being the church, letting your light shine, and reflecting the light of Jesus. And one of the things we always talk about here at the church is that our church should be a lighthouse. So, looking forward to this message. So, Dad, why don't you kind of give us a few sneak peeks as we look ahead to this week, and then we'll pick Pastor Brain's brain about the message as well.
Yeah. So, so we've talked about so far in the series, we've been hanging out in this Acts chapter 2 verse about what the church was all about, the passage, and we did a message on worship, and that's a big part of the church. And then last week we talked about the importance of prayer. Those are the things that sort of set the foundation for everything. And now from that, it's kind of going and doing it. And what does that look like as the church? And so I wanted to talk about that over the next couple of weeks. The focus really this week will be, letting our light shine, and then we'll sort of tie into that next week. We're talking about the, go and make disciples, go, therefore go. And so how those things sort of work together, because the church has to go and be the church, right? And that the Matthew 22 passage reminds us that all of this is about, the greatest thing is loving God all in, heart, mind, soul, and strength, loving your neighbor as yourself. And so it backs up the idea of relationships that we've been talking about. I've been saying, it's about loving God, loving the people of God, loving the future people of God. That's basically my way. I've been saying that passage in this sermon. And so, in the Acts 2 thing, the apostles were teaching and they, all those things are in there. And that's kind of what I want to talk about now. We talked about worship, prayer, what the apostles were teaching. And, I think it's fairly safe to assume that they were teaching the things that Jesus had taught them. And they were just, building on those things to everybody else. And that in the Gospels, there's really about 40 or 50 kind of explicit commandments, the commands that Jesus gave of what it looks like. And these are, we always have to be careful when we use the word command or commandment. I think that these aren't things that we do to earn salvation. These are just the things, these are the things that it looks like to follow Jesus. And, he said, if you love me, you'll obey what I command. And one of those things that I wanted to pick on was about, and we're not going to go through that many of them really, but was about letting your light shine. And in Matthew 5:14, you are the light of the world. A city on a hill can't be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand that gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. So this is one of those sort of things that Jesus said, as it's a command, if you would, but this is what you do. You need to let your light shine. And so we have to figure out, what does that look like? How do we let this light shine? What is that all about? And we'll develop the idea that it's ultimately about reflecting this light that's in Jesus, right? It's the light that Jesus brings into the world is to be reflected, through us into the world around us. I like the sort of the illustration, that the moon doesn't really make its own light. It's just reflecting the light of the sun, right? And that's kind of what we're supposed to do. And instead of reflecting the light of the sun, we're reflecting the light of the son. And that's kind of the picture, because I think that's really helpful, because the moon, you're like, oh, look how bright the moon is. It's just reflecting the light of the sun. And so that's kind of the idea for us. We're to be witnesses, if you would, of the light of Jesus. And we'll tie in the idea too of, John's prologue, John 1, I love the idea. It's such a great, could always go out and hang in John 1 when he talks about John the Baptist, and it said that John the Baptist, he himself was not the light. He came as a witness to the light. And that's true of us. The true light is Jesus, and we're to be a witness to that. We reflect that light in the world around us. And so we have to figure out what that looks like. Well, how do we operate in that? And it's that is just listening and yielding and cooperating with Holy Spirit, and doing the things that we're supposed to do in that God has called us to do in the world, and let people know that there's a way and there's hope, and all those things are happening. So that's kind of the framework that we'll be talking through, and then lots of things will sort of fit into that, hopefully dynamic as we go. And Doug, you talked about we see ourselves as a lighthouse. So the story I'll tell, and I'll go ahead and tell a little bit of it now. 'Cause I'm trying to add, sort of stories of the church, our church, as we go through. There was a time, it was right around 2000, somewhere in there, and I was talking to a guy about the church, and our church was about 200 people at the time, and that's kind of where we'd been for a while. And I I was like, well, okay, what do we do? And I spoke to this guy who was really a church expert kind of guy, and I like him. I still like him, and very smart guy. And he asked about the size of our town, and our town was about 4,000 people. And he said 200 is amazing. He said you've super saturated your area, because you're at whatever the percentage was, 200 of 4,000, for the 10%, 400. We were like at 2%. It's but anyway. He said that's amazing. That's what churches do. That's great. That's probably that's what you're going to do. And I thought, well, okay. But at the same time, I thought to myself, but I'll go to the local grocery store on this small island, and there's a bunch of people I see that I don't know, and I keep running into people after the church has been here now, 15 years on, who live on this little island, and they have no idea that our church exists. And it used to make me crazy. I'm like, how can you not know that we're on this tiny island? You should. And I was like, Lord, that just doesn't make sense to me. How do we're here, and apparently we're doing good because we're super saturated the area or whatever, but I'm just I'm not sure, what goes on. And at some point, two things happened. I had someone that I was talking to who just kind of never been to our church, and knew me kind of, but not much, who had, like, it was a definite word for me, because I was like, well, this is just kind of it. And what they said to me was, no, your church is to be a lighthouse for that area, which, we're on a string of islands, and lighthouses kind of make sense to me, that you need to be a lighthouse. And I said, well, okay, and kind of took that in. And then at some point, not much longer from that, as I started wrestling through that, the whole idea of, well, but we're at 200, we've done it. And I felt like the Lord was pretty clear with me when he said, yeah, Steve, I didn't say that to you. And I was like, oh, well, it might very well be true, but he said, but I didn't say that. And I was like, oh, okay. So for me, that was another turning point to go, okay, well, how do we reflect then the light of Jesus and in our community that we're in, so that we can make a difference? Because in those passages in John 3:16, where it talks about Jesus coming, not to condemn the world, but to save the world. But people that don't know him are condemned already. That the word that's being used there in the Greek is the word krisis, which is where we get the word crisis from.
Hmm.
And people that don't know Jesus are in crisis. It's a crisis. It's not like this is, oh, well, whatever. It's, apart from knowing Jesus, it's a crisis. And we want to be a light so we can help people come to know the light and move away from the crisis. And the one of the harder things is they don't really even know they're in a crisis. So that's why we have to be the reflectors of the light, which we do by being kind and loving well and all those things, and we can't lose sight of that. So that's kind of at the heart of the story. It's to why we do and what we try and do, and the things that are going on is just to be that light wherever we can and meet folks where we can.
Yeah, really good. Always like hearing that story. And one of the things you've always instilled for me is don't let somebody tell you you can't do something, right? And not that he specifically said you can't grow it any larger, but that was the sort of the gist of it is, oh, you've already maxed out. You're like, don't tell me that. So you dig in a bit more. So that's stubbornness at its finest right there. And that it's a holy stubbornness,
Yeah.
which I think we could all use a little more of. Pastor Brain, I'm curious about your thoughts and how this works, in your ministry and whatnot. So if you can, please share for us.
Yeah, it's a great thing. I think this is all about our church, I should say, because um, we're gradually closing up the 100 mark now. I think based on attendance, we should be around 70, 80 people weekly attendance. I mean, over the past 4 years, this is the 5th year of my being in the church now, and we've practically moved from 30, 35 to, we're around 70, 80. Sometimes we get 90 people when we have a good number of visitors. And so, this text in Acts chapter 2 is a very key text in my ministry personally and in our church. So I had to bring that into our church. And that's where we have our kind of little motto for the church. It simply acts to attract, to connect, to transform, and to strengthen. And that's the point of our focus of our ministry. And we're hoping that we can be able to attract people to, connect with them, transform them by means of the gospel, and then strengthen them for the ministry of discipleship and evangelism and all of that. That's the hope. And we're working that through every beat and piece of what we do. And I see the idea of being a lighthouse as really crucial in this, because when the Bible talks about these guys, they subcommitted themselves to the apostles' teachings, and we read that today and we feel that it's about getting some man teach you something. It's not some new stuff. It's about what scriptures teach, because we have the apostles' teachings in the Bible. And if people can get committed enough to the word, they would find the momentum to go out there and multiply and reproduce, because we get to attract as we become more like Jesus. So it's a wonderful thing. I love the fact that you mentioned that the apostles obviously taught what Jesus taught them. I consider the teachings of the apostles as a kind of commentary on the teachings of Jesus, because you would not have so much time with Jesus, but you have time enough with the apostles to know everything that was on the mind of Jesus, even the things that he taught them in secret. And so it's a wonderful thing when we spend time studying the word, and we also get commentaries on Old Testament passages and all of that. You keep saying every time that the Bible is very front loaded, and that's true. And when we get there and we start digging deep into it and finally transition to what we have in the New Testament, it's an interesting thing altogether to experience, because the Bible comes alive. Then you begin to see, yeah, this thing that was mentioned, and these are very practical teachings that we get from the apostles. Very, very practical. They don't give you concepts. for every concept they give, they tell you this is how you move. And that's why you have various therefore points, they give this and therefore, give this and therefore. And those therefore points are really key to me. And I enjoy reading them because I love the transition from the concept to the practice. How do you put this into practice? How does this become your life? And that begins to open up the door for us to attract and to become a lighthouse for others, because let your light so shine, they will see your good works. And that's the point about it. They will not immediately see your faith. The way that they will see your faith will be by the good works that you do. And I enjoy that a lot in that Matthew text, because you don't want to tell people I have faith. You want them to see it. You want them to experience the faith that you have, and they'll glorify your Father in heaven. And sometimes what I tell my people is that they will glorify your Father in heaven does not necessarily mean they will become Christians. But there is a way that unbelievers come to a point where they respect you and they honor God, because they see the way you live and they see the fruit you're bearing. The whole point of our discussion in church this year is around this. We're trying to see how we can attract and reflect the glory of God through fruit bearing. That's our theme for the year, and we're working through the fruit of the Spirit every month, and we're enjoying that because we have to get practical. We have to shine the light out there with the hope that we will win some. And if it happens that we do not win others, let them see the glory of God working through us and working in our midst. And someday we never know the fruit we're sowing. We never know the seed we're sowing in their lives. They would suddenly, maybe they hear the gospel somewhere else, and they'll remember, a lot of things build up to produce faith in someone. And so I love to hear about this, and I would love to hear more about the story, because that story is very significant to all of this. Yeah, you're 200, and so what? Should you rest and relax and say we're 200 while you go out there and meet strange people who don't even know you? I love I love that tension that you found yourself in, because you would feel like this is a crowd. We have a good number of people. They must know us everywhere, but there are people who don't know you. And I remember one of the stories you shared about someone who met you. Was it at a grocery store or something, somewhere, and asked whether you were the pastor they saw was it on YouTube or where? I don't remember. That encounter came to you for some prayer. I mean, those are moments where the light really shines, and people get to connect with you. And my hope is usually just that when people get in contact with us Christians, they should get in contact with God. It should be a very direct relationship, right? Because we have become, in your words, we have become a heaven and earth connection. And people should be able to touch heaven when they get in contact with us. So I look forward to hearing more about this and that story. I'm trying to make some connections with the story that you're sharing. I hope that Sunday the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, would bring clarity to what I'm trying to connect, because I'm picking some very interesting themes from that particular story you're sharing. And I'll definitely apply it to my church. They
Yeah.
they know me for that. When I learn a new thing, I tell them, yeah, I learned this over the weekend, and let's see how it goes.
Yeah. For us, it's a kick bring to because the cultures are so different. The principles work, but how we apply them, right, is and then how they
That's
work
right.
and what people hear and what they expect and what we even hear you know the guy who I spoke to, he was giving me sort of sound church wisdom, and he was trying to do it to encourage me because I was a little like, okay, well, I can't move it past here, I don't. And he was being encouraging, saying, look, you did 200. You've got that. That's great. And I'm like, yeah. And so, you at one point I could have taken that and gone, okay, well, okay, we did it, and so what, but there was that other piece. It was like, but why are we not like? How can I keep meeting people that haven't heard of us? We've been doing this hard for a long time. And And it's because, you know, God sets everything is different. You can't go by the bigger numbers, right? Like, and who knows when God's going to do so. And not that I always want to be careful when I say this. For some things, you know, it's not numbers, right? I mean, it may be that 200 is wonderful, right? And it was. But you don't want to settle for that if it's not where he's done, right? Okay,
That's right.
let's get to 200 and you know, okay, well then we can kick back and relax. It's let's get to 200 and see where he takes from there. Maybe he takes us from 200 to back to 100. We don't know.
Well, but that's kind of where your mission of one more came in. It's like, how do we consistently go after one more? So,
Yeah.
you know, it's not like a total number we're shooting for. It's let's get another one.
Yeah,
You
let's
know?
just keep getting one.
That's
And
Yeah.
we live in an area where people leave, they move constantly, to the point where people that have been to our church, when they move, if they come back 6 months or a year later, they will often say to me, I don't know anybody here. It feels like that.
Well,
Everybody has,
it's like 5 years, I'd say. You know,
it happens
we
quick.
do live close to a Navy base and a Coast Guard base, so you have both of those. So we get military families, and they're just revolving, right? They're here 4 years, so we try to
right.
get them early on in their
Yeah,
stay so that they
yeah,
can plug in for a bit.
yeah,
But and you know, it's a interesting place to live in where we live. People get a Jimmy Buffett idea of what it's like to live here, and then in order to live here, you have to work 2 or 3 jobs, and they're like, well, this doesn't work, and they
yeah,
they, they move, so you get some of that. But
yeah.
yeah, you know, that's why that concept of just one more. It was, you know,
Yeah,
don't set yourself a limit, but if you're always going after one more, that as you said, Brain, the fruit just kind of follows. So,
Yeah.
that's right.
yep,
That's right.
man.
It's
And you never
great. It's
know.
great.
The thing about that too is when you're going after one more, the one that you might impact, you never know how many they're going to impact, right?
That's right.
And that's all of a sudden you get one, and then like they're bringing all their friends and their families, and they're all got, and then it's like, okay, this is amazing when those things happen. You just never know, so you just keep plugging
That's true.
along. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like you know, when you mentioned that, I remember this past Sunday we had, because we're in a student area, and so most of the people that we have in church, just like your case with the military, we have mostly students at the church, and so they come. This Sunday we had like 15 of them. When when we asked to see the visitors, I mean, it was like the whole church was standing up. I was like, how come? You know, there were like 15 of them. And I was wondering and all of these people got to church possibly through one person, one person who maybe is a friend and said, yeah, you're here to write your exams because they're writing the GC exams now. And so let's go to our church. And then you have 15 people gather and they're in church. And so, well, I got excited. I was really happy about it because if you spend just a week with them, that's a week of impact. You get to sow a seed. So I just asked the church leadership to get some pens, just give them. They're here to write exams, so let them get pens, and they can do that. So we managed to get that for them and give them a single pen each, and I believe they're happy about it. And when they go out there, they'll be like, "Yeah, we got to the church and got an extra pen for our exams." I can imagine what the effect of that, but I'm trying to relate with what you're saying. Sometimes they rotate, and you never know who you would impact. You never know how many people they will bring. One person can fill up the entire church all of a sudden. You don't know how that happened.
Yeah. Well, and see those kind of things I always get excited about because that's like, okay, if I can get a person for a pen, I'm gonna, I'm
you're,
gonna
you're
go.
gonna get as
I,
many pens
I'm
as
gonna go get me
possible.
a bunch of pens, and I'll be giving
That's
them away. Oh, you go to that church, you get a pen. Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, because if there's students that need those kind of things, see, sometimes it's just a matter of making a connection, right? And
that's
if
right.
they can come and you help them with something, and then it's not that they have to, but they're way more receptive to listening then. Like, why are you
That's
doing
right.
that? and there's nothing in it for you. No, but while you're here, let me tell you about Jesus. Let me tell you about the one
That's
who provided the pen. But you don't have to.
Yeah.
But
Almost as good as a fish sandwich, as we've lost my dad's camera. Oh, what'd you do? Did you put your hand over it?
no, the lens cap fell down when I was laughing. I have a
I didn't know if it was the new cat or something.
no, I have a security lens on there just in case someone hacks the camera and can watch me whenever I'm not paying attention.
Man, that is a really boring hacker to hack you. What you're doing? You're just sitting there like this.
I don't want it to go by.
In a separate room, just your work area. Just doing this.
You just never know. Yeah.
This is the expression I give when my dad's like having to have a serious talk with me. Like, Doug, I can't believe you just did that. Oh.
No, I don't.
The resemblance is uncanny.
This is what you have to look forward to. Good luck.
Yeah, right. I'm just thankful you have hair, because I'm surprised how much of mine is still there. A lot of my friends and brothers-in-law.
I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think when I get to 40, I'll still have hair on my head. I don't think so. The thing is, it's all coming out from.
You start to get bigger. Your forehead, because mine went back in my 30s. It went back.
He's got the widow. Yeah, I got a pretty good. Once it's like super long, you end up with what we call a 5 head.
That's what I was about to say. Goes from a 4 head to a 5 head. Do you understand that, Brain?
I'm getting there. I should be getting this
towards a 5 head. Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
in the next 5 years.
Yeah. Then it's a 6 head, and then
you don't want to go too far with it. Then you just bald,
Yeah.
What a wonderful note to end on. If you're listening to this podcast, we love you and appreciate you all. I hope you're taking some courses at our Bible Institute. Makes a big difference when you read your Bible. And hey, keep being lighthouses. Be an active part of your church. Invite people to church. We as pastors appreciate it when you do that. And I think that's good enough for today. God bless you all. We'll see you next time.